are they actually doing it, right? This is the week where they actually show up and they actually build it and they actually put it all together. And I think it's a great example sort of the response of how do we move forward and how do we do better, right? They massively messed up in terms of their faith in God, their all the laws they're supposed to uphold. And now they put it into action. They build the tabernacle. They say they commit to having God in their community, in their space. And it sort of answers the question of where do we go from here? So what I actually want to focus on this week is not the Torah portion, but is the Haftarah portion. Because we are also in it's a special Shabbat as part of the lead up to Passover. So it's called Shabbat Parah. Does anyone know what that might be about? If anyone knows the word parah, probably, maybe yes, maybe no.
Cow.
Exactly. It means cow Shabbat. So what is it talking about, right? So this is the part where the addition, there's it's called a maftir, which is sort of like a sort of closing section of Torah, is the section about the red heifer ritual. So the red heifer ritual was this special ritual that essentially cleanses in order to construct the temple, right? In order to basically that's ultimately what it's for, but to cleanse all of the people, all of the Israelites, basically of the defilement that comes with from a dead body, like touching a dead body, or being in proximity to a dead body, which happens as people had, loved ones who would die at home, the body needed to be moved, people were visiting, were going to funerals, that there were just important reasons that people were in contact with a dead body. But there's this special ritual to purify everyone of this, which essentially you need a red heifer, a red cow that is completely red. Not a single hair is white or black or brown. It is all red. You sacrifice the red heifer. You essentially sort of like burn it, mix the ashes with water, and you go around and the priest gives all of the people this potion essentially to drink. And this is the purifying ritual. So the connection with this is with Passover, which again, we have, the Passover sacrifice. Passover is also sort of like a very sort of messianic time of redemption and like personal redemption and national redemption. And so that's sort of where the connection comes from. All that being said, the special Haftarah for Shabbat Parah is from the book of Ezekiel. So I want us to look at Ezekiel, which is like the text that is read for the Torah portion, for the Haftarah portion. And it's not explicitly connected to either the Torah portion this week, Passover, or the red heifer ritual. But I want us to take a look at it because it's all within that question, all within the themes sort of restoration, of defilement and errors and mistakes and what we need to do in order to move forward from that. So we're going to look at that in a second. But first, I'm going to give just a brief little introduction for Ezekiel. So Ezekiel is one of the prophetic books. It's found in Nevi'im, in the prophets section, one of the main prophets. And Ezekiel is a wackadoo. Ezekiel is some of the most like kind of bizarre imagery.
That's so cool,
like,
Rabbi. I'm sorry that you said that like that. It's just you're so refreshing.
Yeah. Well, so, and I say this with love too. I wrote my undergraduate thesis on Ezekiel, so I spent a lot of time with him. But so I just say this, that like there's very kind of like graphic imagery, and it's just very intense. So part of what because he takes the role of being a prophet very, very seriously. So it's the idea that so what is it that the prophets are doing? They're talking about what's going to come in the future, but they're also saying what we're supposed to do religiously, spiritually, ethically. One of my professors said that the prophets aren't foretelling, they're forthtelling. That they're saying, this is what you should do. This is what you're going to need to do. This is what God needs you to do. So Ezekiel is giving his prophecy around the time of the destruction of Jerusalem and the first temple by the Babylonians. He's writing about 10 years before the destruction of the temple, so around, let's call it 590 BCE. And he's writing, basically, there's this tragedy happening, right? The Babylonians have captured Jerusalem, have taken over the land. The first thing that they do is they deported the elites, right? The priests, the prophets, the kingly, priestly, noble class. They removed from Jerusalem and sent back to Babylonia. As things continue, things will eventually escalate, and they're going to destroy the temple. But at this point, basically, this tragedy of the loss of autonomy, of a foreign people coming and conquering, destroying, taking over your land and your people, is a traumatizing experience for a people. So Ezekiel, along with other prophets who are writing at this time, are trying to answer the question, why did this happen, and what do we need to do? So Ezekiel's answer to this is, well, what we did wrong was that we did not live with religious purity. We did not properly sacrifice. We did not properly live accordance to the laws that God gave us. And this is why God got so mad that God let the Babylonians destroy us. All right, so that's a little background on Ezekiel. Any questions? I know I just threw a lot of information at you. Any questions about this?
Rabbi, I have a question.
Yes.
Will you define religious purity for me, please?
So thinking about like keeping kosher, laws about at this time, this is when there was the temple and there were sacrifices, like correct ways to make sacrifices, all the stuff that the priests were sort of telling we're doing for religion then.
Oh, I understand, but I'm talking about in the modern day, in a liberal sense, as a Reformed Jew.
So
Would you?
so that's a totally separate conversation. We're gonna
Okay,
imagine.
when I meet you in person, we'll talk about that.
Yes. So let's imagine we're biblical Jews and we're going to the temple, and the priests are facilitating, our relationship with God. Not that we're modern people, because yes, that's it's a great question, but it's a totally separate issue. Yes, Catherine.
So did Ezekiel for predict the in his writings that the Babylonians would capture Jerusalem, or was he explaining why they were able to?
He was explaining why they were able to. Yeah. And then saying, and here's what we need to do. And sort of saying, like, having visions of like, and here's what God's going to do to punish us, but then restore us. Yeah. All right, great. I'm going to pull up the text. All right. Should be able to see that there. All right. So why don't we dig in to Ezekiel here? All right. Would someone like to read for us? Helen, you want to go for it? We'll have opportunities to read.
I can't, I'm on my cell phone and the font is too small. Could you tell me where in Ezekiel you are and I can read from my text?
Starting at 16, at chapter 36, verse 16.
Don't count on me because it'll take me a while. Go ahead.
Okay, Catherine, you want to?
The word of God came to me, O mortal, when the house of Israel dwelt on their own soil, they defiled it with their ways and their deeds. Their ways were in my sight like the impurity of a menstruous woman. So I poured out my wrath on them for the blood that they shed upon their land, and for the fetishes with which they defiled it. I scattered them among the nations, and they were dispersed through the countries. I punished them in accordance with their ways and their deeds. But when they came to those nations, they caused my holy name to be profaned, in that it was said of them, 'These are God's people,' yet they had to leave their land. Therefore I am concerned for my holy name, which the house of Israel have caused to be profaned among the nations to which they have come."
All right, let's pause there for a second. Okay, so what does he seem to be, what's he saying? What's God through Ezekiel talking about?
I would say he's talking about idol worship.
So yeah, so where are you seeing the references to idol worship?
The fetishes.
Exactly, right? So again, this is like the religious purity focus, for right. So they had their fetishes like idol worship, the rituals that they were doing for that. Exactly. Okay, so God is unhappy about the idol worship. What's the metaphor? What's the language that's being used to describe it?
Menstruation.
A menstruous woman, right? So this is another element of the purity issues, right? That so there was for women who were menstruating, whoops, didn't mean to hit that. There's all these purity laws around menstruation and things like that about going to the mikvah and being separated. So the impurity of a menstruous woman is basically saying like someone who's just going around spreading impurity without any consideration for what's going on. Okay, Helen?
Yeah, in my text, the term harlot and harlotry is used.
Oh yeah, instead of menstruous woman.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's another word that gets used a lot in Ezekiel. I'm just looking in the Hebrew to see. Nida. Well, it's interesting. So it actually does say. So that's an interesting. I wonder what translation you're using because it does say need like hanida, which means over here, which means a woman who's menstruating. But so Ezekiel will actually will use the language of like so the harlotry is sort of like connected also with idolatry because if the relationship between God and the Jewish people is meant to be monogamous, that then worshiping other gods is sort of having an extramarital affair. Catherine?
When it talks about the blood shed upon the land,
Mm-hmm.
is that a reference as well to idol worship or something else?
So it's kind of both. Like it could be a reference to idol worship, but it's also kind of so blood is a very defiling, is a ritually impure substance. And actually, the book of Ezekiel has the most references to blood out of any book in all of Tanakh, because it's very like purity focused. Like blood is sort of like a hazardous like material. Because it can cause it's life sustaining, it's life, losing, and contact with blood, right? Like kashrut is all about removing blood from the meat before you eat it. So blood is a very like handled with care kind of term for religious purity. So when Ezekiel is saying like you shed blood is sort of like saying like you just ritually impure it all over the place. Great. And what has happened to the Israelites that, like, what is the punishment that's come to them?
They were scattered.
Mm-hmm. Right? And why would that be a significant punishment for the Israelites?
Because the Holy Land was the reward.
Right. It's a huge part of the covenant that there's a promised land that's given to you where you will dwell.
Mm-hmm.
So that they lost this place. is pretty a big deal. Okay. And how is it like what else is the like what other like issues might be? So they've been scattered, and then what else seems to be like the punishment or the repercussions as well?
They look bad. They look bad to the other nations, and God feels embarrassed
Yeah.
by how they, other nations are saying, you're making me look bad. You're supposed to be my people, but you had to leave your land.
Right. All the other nations are saying, well, the Israelites aren't so great. They were supposed to have this land and they got kicked out of it. So like they clearly aren't so great, right? These are God's people, yet they have had to leave their land. Right? See down here in verse 20, that this, God of the Jewish people is meant to be the most powerful God of all the world, and yet didn't seem to be able to protect the people that God swore to protect, right? So God's then saying, like, I need to show that it's not that I was beaten, it was that you all messed up and I let you be punished. Right? It's God's reputation is at stake too here. Which is kind of interesting. I think also like if we want to put that in the context of like along with the golden calf episode of right, like this is another example of like God being like, I just took you out of Egypt with amazing miracles. And the first thing you want to do is forget about it. You're making me look bad.
Is there a connection point between this and what we say at the end of the Seder, like next year in Jerusalem?
So yes and no, right? So the idea, like, because Passover is all about, restoration and redemption. And it's both, like telling the story of, from slavery in Egypt to freedom, in the promised land. And then there's still like the idea of like, and then redemption. So restoration for the Jewish people is always about coming back to Israel, is always about coming back to Jerusalem. So it's not like this verse specifically, but that theme that being restored back to the land is a huge part of like when we talk about like when tragedy and errors occur, how do we move forward? How do we fix it? What's needed? Like in the Jewish, I don't know, ecosystem, right? The Jewish universe, return to the land of Israel is always part of, and what is needed to be fully restored. Yeah. All right. So why don't we look at some more verses? Would somebody else like to read? In verse 22. Should I start calling on people?
I can read.
Okay.
Should I go for it?
Please.
I couldn't tell if you called on me or not because I'm enlarging the font here. Sorry.
Yes, go for it.
Okay. Say to the house of Israel, thus said the sovereign God, not for your sake will I act, O house of Israel, but for my holy name, which you have caused to be profaned among the nations to which you have come.
You see the next verses?
The one you highlighted?
Here, this one.
It's not letting me scroll. Okay. The one that starts, I will sanctify?
Mm-hmm.
I will sanctify my great name that has been profaned among the nations, among whom you have caused it to be profaned. And the nations shall know that I am God, declares the sovereign God. when I manifest my holiness before their eyes through you.
All right, keep going.
I will take you from among the nations and gather you from all the countries, and I will bring you back to your own land.
Okay, we're gonna keep going.
I will sprinkle pure water upon you, and you shall be purified. I will purify you from all your defilement and from your fetishes.
Okay, two more verses.
And I will give you a new heart and put a new spirit into you. I will remove the heart of stone. I will remove the heart of stone from your body and give you a heart of flesh. And I will put my spirit into you. Thus I will cause you to follow my laws and faithfully to observe my rules.
All right, great. So we'll pause there. We'll pause there for now. So this is part of the, right, the vision of restoration. So what's going to happen?
Well, I would say that God will convince the other peoples of the world through the righteousness of the Jews that they encounter that God is great.
Well, I don't know if it's anything that the Jews are going to do. It's going to convince God,
Well, isn't that what it
or
says?
that's going to convince the nations.
It says exactly that, doesn't it?
No, it says, I will sanctify my name when I manifest my holiness. I will take you out and I will bring you back to your land.
Well, before that, it says, when I manifest my holiness before their eyes through you.
Right. Through you being what's going to happen to you when all of a sudden you're able to come back.
Okay.
So because, and this is why I say this, and then what is God, and then once they get back, what is God going to do? I will give you a new heart. Sorry?
You'll purify them by sprinkling the holy water and wash off all that blood.
Uh-huh. And I will remove a heart of stone and give you a heart of flesh. We'll talk about what that means. And I will put my spirit into you. Right? So God's kind of saying, you guys screwed up. So I'm going to fix you so that you're going to do better next time. And this time you're actually going to follow the rules. Because when you're left to your own devices, apparently this is what you're doing. Right? Which is a really interesting sort of vision of how it's going to be fixed is, right? God says, I'm going to do another miracle. I'm going to bring you all back and I'm going to fix you.
Rabbi, may I interject here?
Sure.
An analogy.
Mhm.
Someone I love very much just had heart surgery, and it saved their life. And I was so worried, but now I'm not, because it was preventive measures and why it happened in the first place, just out of the blue. But it was God saving this person's life that I love. And I'm listening to what you're saying about a new heart. This is so profound. Thank you for this study. It just means the world to me. Thank you so much.
Mhm. Right. So the opportunities that come when your heart is open. So, right. So what does this like metaphor mean? New heart, like a heart of flesh versus a heart of stone.
New attitude of love for God as opposed to worshiping the stone idols.
Great. So like the
Compassion,
connection of the stone with the
compassion, right,
idols.
Rabbi?
Nice.
Compassion for the stranger, compassion for community, giving back, getting involved, making a difference.
Okay, great. Brad?
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, we talked about circumcising the heart.
Yeah.
So we're back to square one with circumcision, with starting all over again.
You mean from like when it talked before about circumcising your heart, and then
Yeah,
now we're
well, I'm
back in
just
another
saying,
text?
when when you have a new heart, you're going to be circumcised again in a metaphoric way to solidify your covenant with God. So you're going to reestablish that covenant through a second circumcision once you have your new heart.
Exactly. It's an opportunity to renew the covenant because, if we want to, if it's a heart of stone, can't circumcise a stone. But right, because it's stone, right? Right. So by having a heart of flesh, you're then in a position where you could renew the covenant, come back into the covenant in that way. Great. Okay, so let's see what else happens in this Haftarah. Someone else like to read?
I can read. What verse are we at?
Verse 28.
It said, then you shall dwell in the land that I gave you to your ancestors, and you shall be my people, and I will be your God.
Mhm.
And when I have delivered you from all your impurity, I will summon the grain and make it abundant, and I will not bring famine upon you.
Mhm.
And I'll make the fruit of your trees and the crops of your fields abundant, and so that you shall never again be humiliated before nations because of famine.
Okay. So great. So what is God, again, what is God going to do as part of this restoration?
Bless us.
Mm-hmm. Right? I've delivered you, and I will summon the grain, and I will make it abundant, and I'm not going to bring famine. Right? And this will be another sign of God's like reconciliation with
I
the
want
people.
to humbly say, gratefully, that is happening in my life right now after 33 years. And I understand this. God sees our hearts and He knows our intentions. And thank you, Rabbi. You're such a refreshing, intelligent, wise rabbi.
So why don't we right, so this is God is saying, I'm gonna bring blessings, I'm not gonna continue to punish you, but and we get an interesting continuation of the vision. Someone else would like to pick up?
No, I will.
Okay, great.
Not for your sake will I act, declares the sovereign God. Take good note.
Wait,
Be
hold on.
ashamed.
Go back up one verse.
Oh, then shall you recall your evil ways and your base conduct, and you shall loathe yourselves for your iniquities and your abhorrent practices. Not for your sake will I act, declares the sovereign God. Take good note. Be ashamed and humiliated because of your ways, O house of Israel.
Okay, so how does that go on as an addendum to what was just said?
Right. You need to move it down so I can't see the next.
Well, no, I just want to talk about this for a second.
Oh, okay.
Right?
You
So
have to remember what you did wrong.
yep. Feel shame.
Absolutely.
So, right, uh I'm going to do all these kind things for you. I will redeem you, I will restore you, I will give you plenty. And because I can't help but hear, and because I treat you so nicely, you're going to remember how you messed up. So if we go back to the question that we started with of how do we move forward after we've messed up, after we've caused harm, how does this part sit with us?
Creates a lot of guilt.
A lot of guilt.
I feel like it's that emotional, it's that internal looking of realizing like, wow, we really did the wrong thing before. And now I really understand that we really did the wrong thing. And it's kind of like that internal reminder that you need to kind of reset your compass. Like if you now have a different heart, hopefully you have a different barometer for what is right and what is wrong, and you don't make the same mistakes you made before. But it is necessary to kind of like feel the weight of the difference between those two choices.
Right. So feeling the guilt, right? And I love that too, right? Now that you have a heart of flesh, right? You have the ability to be more empathetic, to be more connected to God. Um, maybe you didn't have the capacity to feel guilt before this, right? With your heart of stone, you weren't able to feel that guilt.
I'm thinking that this may say something about just the way people experience their life, which is
Hmm.
you do something, but you don't think about it at the time. It's only later, kind of in tranquility, that you're suddenly realizing about things, and then you can move on to
Hmm.
do things better.
Got it. So once you have the ability, in the moment, you don't notice it. But once you have a second to kind of, you're removed from it, you can pause, you can reflect. That's when it really, it might hit you.
Mhm.
Hmm. Yeah.
I'm also hearing like two things, like Dan, what you were saying about like in that moment of tranquility, like in the moment when you were doing the wrong thing, there maybe would have been some like fear involved or some lack of faith involved or a scarcity complex involved. But when you're surrounded by abundance, it might be a little, I don't know, that isn't always the case, but sometimes feeling like you don't have those same pressures allows you to see, oh wow, I really wasn't acting from a right place. Um, Also, would a heart of stone be much heavier than a heart of flesh?
Probably.
When you
I'm
talked,
not a cardiologist, call it cardiologist, but I would bet.
yeah, it's not a pumice stone. It's probably like a stone. So when you talked about being able to feel guilt now that you don't have that kind of heart, that that image made a different kind of sense to me.
Hmm. Yeah, when you're not weighed down in the same way.
May I ask you a question, Rabbi?
Sure.
What happens when you do something and you're in shock and trauma and afraid for your family, but you do what you think is the best for them, but the rest of the world looks at, oh no, she did that, but then they weren't there, they didn't know. It's like I can't go into. I'm very private, but um, I'm referring to. I think mothers make the best choices for what's the safest choice for their family in situations that they don't expect to happen. Like if you have a sudden death of your husband and you're young. I mean, I was so young and so many years ago, and now my daughter goes, "Mom, don't cry. Go sing me a song." So I think Adonai looks at this, and then Moshe predicted the anti-Semitism rise and how they're hidden away. And now I'm going to be in public. It's all part of a plan that's bigger than me and bigger than us. So I just want to say, I think if we really talk to God and pray and say, Lord, you know what, you were there with me. Because look at the hostages and what they had to deal with and the things that we deal when we run in fear for our lives and we're worried about our families. Sometimes we don't always know how to rationally make the right choices, but we always do the best for our families. That's what I'm going to say because,
Yeah.
man, I was
Yeah.
a
And
mess. I was a mess. I took drugs.
so I think so Donna, so I think too, right? Like there's a difference. I think one of the things that Ezekiel is talking about here, because you're right, there are complex times where we do the best that we can. But then there's other times when there's a clear, you know, what Ezekiel's talking about here is a sort of clear right and wrong of what we should have been doing.
Thank you for telling me that, but I really appreciate that because I like Jamie Lee Curtis said. I met her. She goes, I admit I was a drug addict and alcoholic, but now look at me now. And it's like, it's
Mm.
all good. We all do what we have to do to take away the pain. But I really like Rabbi Leader said, he had a back problem and he got addicted to painkillers.
So hold on, and I want to make sure we get to Brad.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Brad, you want to go for it?
Oh, I think it's also interesting to ask, how is God able to move on?
Ooh,
Not just the people, but how is God able to move on? He's able to move on in a sense because he seems to uh, find a way to control his anger and to create an environment which is propitious for new growth.
Right. And that's a great question because within this, right, what's kind of at the core of the like what the prophets are talking about is ultimately about the relationship between the Jewish people and God, right? So it's a two-way. They're the things the Israelites have done, and what will happen to them, but then also how God, it feels and reacts to it. right? So God being able to move forward from it as well, right? Because this is also a violation of God's trust. And God's commitment to the relationship by doing idol worship and all these things that we're not supposed to do, right? So here's God's ability to move forward. And this was another question that I had too, is that, right, God is the one ultimately who's trying to cause the guilt. So what do we make of God guilting us, right? Doing these nice things, these kind things, to then make us feel guilty for the things that we did wrong? And it's a very open-ended question. At least God in this text.
Someone has to teach you.
Hmm.
And the someone in this case, whether God is real or in our minds, that's who the someone is. Depends on who is handling making you feel guilty and how they handle your guilt. Your guilt.
But in this case, God is sort of like the, you know, the
Yeah.
parent, the educator, something who's
Right.
got
Well,
it.
this is like the Day of Atonement.
Right? Right, that God is, it's a little less that God is making us feel guilty, but God is like telling us, look in the mirror, right? As you were saying before, right? That the time of tranquility to really reflect and really experience it, really to let it sink in what we've done, that's all what Yom Kippur is about, right? Carving out that time to just sit and really be aware and acknowledge things in ways we maybe haven't the rest of the year. Great. Brad?
Yeah, I don't see God trying to make us feel guilty here. I see, in fact, a loving God who is able to forget what's happened and is ready to just let us move forward without holding a grudge. So I see a different kind of God here, not one who's trying to make us feel guilty.
Even though God gives us all these blessings, and then God says, I'm going to give you all these nice things, and then you're going to feel really guilty. Or is that just a natural consequence of what's happening?
I don't think that's God's aim, is to make us feel guilty. It may be a consequence, but it's not his goal in doing this.
Okay. So it might just be something that stems from it, but God's not trying.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay.
May I interject? I agree with that, but I also watched Barbara Streisand's movie, The Guilt Trip. It's really good. You got to watch it. But this is true about, I think God is loving, and he also, that guilt makes us reflect and look back because, you know, the proverbial thing with the Gentiles always say, you Jews in your guilt trip. I'm just like, well, we all have one. But don't mean it in an anti-Semitic way. They're just joking.
All right. Well,
Okay.
hold on. I want to make sure we only have 10 minutes left. I want to get to the rest of the text. Hold on.
Okay, dear. Thank you.
Okay. So now we'll wrap up. This is the end of the Haftarah. So the people are back in their land. They feel, you know, humiliated. And God says, "Not for your sake will I act," declares God. To take good note, be ashamed and be humiliated because of your ways, house of Israel, says God. God is telling them, be ashamed, be humiliated. Thus said the sovereign God, when I have purified all your iniquities, I will people your settlements. The ruined places shall be rebuilt. I'll send all the people will come back to the land and come back to the towns. And the desolate land, after lying waste in the sight of every passerby, shall again be tilled. And it shall be said, that land, once desolate, has become like the Garden of Eden, and the cities, once ruined and desolate and ravaged, are now populated and fortified. The nations that are left around you shall know that I, God, have rebuilt the ravaged places and replanted the desolate land. I, God, have spoken and will act. Thus said the sovereign God. Moreover, in this I will respond to the house of Israel and act for their sake. I will multiply their people like sheep. As Jerusalem is filled with sacrificial sheep during her festival, so shall the ruined cities be filled with the flocks of people, and they shall know that I am God. So that is the Haftarah. So what is the vision of the restoration? What is it going to look like?
Full of people and sheep.
Full of people and sheep.
The Garden of Eden.
The Garden of Eden, which is a pretty strong symbol, right? Eden was the untainted time, right? This was before human beings knew right from wrong. We didn't even know enough to choose wrong. We just were. So this is what it will be like. It will be like back in Eden when everything was bliss.
Heaven on earth, Rabbi.
Yeah. And what else? What else are we seeing?
Well, we're also seeing that God is concerned about other non-Jewish nations and their attitudes.
Yeah. Right? God cares about, as God says, for the sake of my name, basically for my reputation. We've gotta rebuild our reputation here.
When he talks about the cities once ruined, desolate, and ravaged, populated and fortified, is that specifically the land of Israel, or like all lands that have been ruined for like different peoples?
This is just Israel, right? So this is speaking specifically. So there are some prophets that then talk about, like, there's national restoration and then there's like global restoration. This is just talking about in the land of Israel. Mm-hmm.
Well, if we can get back to the Torah portion that we didn't talk about, it seems interesting in that it describes a wandering people with a mobile mishkan, and yet the whole focus is on having a place, and that is the only place where we should be. So it's almost like a duality here between wandering and having a place.
Exactly, great. And those are two important themes. Wandering, right? Wandering and being settled. And those are two, but for the Jews, it's wandering for the sake, right, of getting to the place, right? Wandering through the desert to get to the promised land, to be situated, to be settled in our land that God gave to us. So you're right. So part of like where we are in the Torah portion is this part where they're on the journey and they're in the wandering. But you're right. This is then something that's talking about being resettled and being replaced back in our permanent place. Nice. Brad, you have a hand raised? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, I'm a bit puzzled by the reference to Eden because I thought it was part of Jewish theology that not to dream or not to, that a return to Eden is not part of Jewish thought or aspiration. Am I incorrect there? I mean, I've heard that said a number of different times that we don't wish to return to Eden.
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of the redeemed world, right? Olam haba, the world to come, will be like Eden, right? There is that aspect. But we know in our time and place, we can't go back to, we can't, Eden being also like this place of innocence and lacking of wisdom, and right, we can't go back to this place. But there is still, and notice here, right, like it says, it has become like the Garden of Eden, right? They're not saying, oh, we're back in Eden, but that's the metaphor, right? That's the symbolism.
But in what way is it like the Garden of Eden?
Well, what do you think?
I'm puzzled. I don't know. That's why I'm
So
asking.
yeah. So this is the part where God is saying all the places, like all the cities that were destroyed and all the land, all the fields that have been lying, destroyed by war and unplanted. Now when people come and see them, they will say, "Oh, this is like Eden," right? That everything has been replanted and is growing and is flourishing, after being desolate. So it's like the physical beauty and flourishing of the Garden
I
of Eden.
see.
Yeah.
Is it also
So not a bad end result for restoration. If we want to think about, how do we, going back to the original question, how do we move forward and what do we hope is going to be in store for us after we make a mistake and after we repair? And I think Ezekiel gives kind of, a severe or an intense set of consequences, right? This is what you're going to experience. You will be scattered amongst the nations. You will feel ashamed. Once you come back, you will feel ashamed, but it's going to be beautiful and you will be renewed and you will be filled with a new heart. Which may or may not be our vision for, personal redemption when whenever we make mistakes or move forward. But I think it's, the season of Passover is all about redemption, and sort of moving from narrowness to openness. And so it's a helpful way just to get our minds turning on those themes. And it's also just like Ezekiel is kind of an oddball. It's kind of, I like to, it's always fun to bring in the prophets because it just gives us a different flavor than Torah every now and then. But thank you all. So yes, Brad.
Rabbi, can I ask one last question? Because it's
Please.
something that's puzzled me for I don't know how long. I think the word redemption is the most puzzling, undefinable word in the English language. How would you define redemption?
It's a great question at 12:58. I think certainly from the Jewish context, because words like that have so much meaning and richness, I would put it in the Jewish context. And I think from a Jewish perspective, it means sort of moving from limitations and narrowness and pain and oppression in some kind of way to a way of living, a way of being that is open, that is filled with possibilities, that is has autonomy and agency, and redemption is being, whether that's from our own, right? We can be redeemed from something that someone has put upon us, circumstances someone has put upon us, or being redeemed from our own limiting fear or concerns, or right, like people can be redeemed from their anxiety disorders. So that's how I would, at least in a Jewish context, that's how I would frame it. The opening, the narrowness of the world to the openness of the world.
It's interesting. I once had a rabbi who said it was moving from a bad place to a better place.
Yeah.
But it's I like your take better.
But same idea. Same idea. I also there's one of the psalms that we sing during Passover. Min hametzar karatia anani b'merchavia. From my narrowness I called, and God answered me with openness. So whenever it comes to Passover, that's sort of the line that's playing in my head. All right. Well, thank
It's
you.
interesting that you mentioned singing, because that's what I put in chat. Singing, and he inhabits our praises. So when we sing it at services together in the temple, God's there and he lifts our spirits and the depression goes away. Keep singing and listen to the music.
All right. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you
Shabbat
for
Shalom.
joining.
Thank
It was
you.
great to study with you all. Have a great weekend, a great Friday, and I hope I'll see you soon.
Love
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
See you
Rabbi.
soon.
Thank you, Merle.
care.
Thank you, Brad. Glad to see you laughing, Brad. God bless everybody. Take care.
You too.